Hello everyone and welcome. In this video, we are going to be talking about how I approach problem solving in general and both either at my work or for personal projects. So to sort of demonstrate how I go about solving problems, mostly, and this video mostly applies to when I'm designing like programs or designing applications. I'm going to be kind of creating and jotting down some notes and kind of tips here, and then we're going to be going through two specific applications that I've designed for myself and kind of the process that I went about when creating them. So I roughly follow a modified version of the SDLC, or also known as the software development lifecycle. Now this is like kind of like the general way that a lot of software engineers approach programming, but I again put my own twist and kind of just follow my own steps when it comes to this. And another thing to note is my process actually does vary between if I'm working on a work project or if I'm working on a personal project. Obviously, when I'm working on a personal project, I don't give as much thought and as much, like, I'm not as meticulous because I'm the only person who's using my code versus I have to be conscious of an entire team using my code when I am doing a work project, for example. So, of course, the first step that I actually do when I create or when I think of a project, personally at least, is I will come up with a conceptual design. Now, to kind of illustrate this, we're going to go ahead and go into my snippet manager program. So I actually made a short 5-episode mini-series on designing the snippet manager program and at least kind of the way I went about designing it. But just for a quick recap, if you haven't seen that, the snippet manager program is basically where I can save snippets across my computer. And if you don't code, a snippet is basically you type in a shortcut and then it will expand out to a much larger text. For example, if I do this and type in site, it will replace it with my website. Or if I do GH for my GitHub, it will replace it with my GitHub. And this works across my computer. Like I can do it in here, or I can do it in in VS Code, for example, or Slack, or anything really. As long as I have a text box, I can actually use my code snippet. So that was one of the cool programs I designed. Now, when we were applying this to the first step, come up with a conceptual design, well, I thought, hey, kind of like here in Google, like let's say hello, notice like there's a ton of auto-completes that come up in Google. This is somewhat of the idea I had in mind, except you don't really have this menu of autocompletes. You just type in hello, and then maybe it autocompletes to hello, my name is Matthew or something. Like it kind of already knows. So my first thought, of course, was conceptually, was we're going to need a way to kind of read in what the user types. So if I type in site, I need my program to know that I actually typed in site, meaning, okay, so that, just off the bat, that means we're going to have to be collecting user kind of keystrokes. We're going to have to be logging the keystrokes. And then I thought we're going to have a way to delete after they type it in, and then we're going to have a way to kind of type in the actual snippet. So that was me in my head just coming up with a conceptual design of our of the program I was creating. And then of course, right after I created that conceptual design, I had a ton of questions. Now, of course, when I do questions, or when there's always a ton of questions that come up kind of right after I come up with the conceptual design. And this somewhat ties into the third tip, which is design requirements slash plan, really. So like, okay, so again, to come back here to number 2 questions, my first questions were, how are we going to actually read in the user keystrokes? Like, how are we going to know what the user's typing? And then my second question was, how are we going to delete? And then my third question was, how are we going to type? So I literally went into Google here and said, since I was using Node.js, I was saying how to read keystrokes. And then this is not from stdin because we don't want to, we're not actually making like a program that you input into. So let's see, Node.js keylogger, maybe. That's something that might come here. So Stack Overflow 2015, yes, you can use Node.js to write an application that's a keylogger. Cool. You know, you can use Node FFI. Okay, so this is one thing. Foreign function interface. Okay, so I could have gone through that and went through that route, but I did end up going with a Node.js read keystrokes. Let's see here. So I don't even know where I went. I went somewhere around here, and I ended up landing on a library called nut-js, and I ended up using this. Or no, this is for the input. I ended up using a library called iohook, which, as you can see, I visited here. Global keyboard and mouse listener, which means that this kind of code will listen to the mouse and keyboard, aka we can use it to figure out what the user's typing. So that was another question. That was one of the questions I came up with. And then again, like I said, I ended up using a library called nut.js, which I found by searching up JavaScript control keyboard. And, you know, I was looking through the, you know, various things, and obviously this is not very useful, so control keyboard input maybe. How to take keyboard input in JavaScript. So we're just looking around here. So of course, you know, this is the way I did my research basically. And again, I did land on Nut.js. So again, that was my second question answered. This library right here is used for UI automation. So basically it can native UI interactions, aka it can interact with your computer using the keyboard and or mouse, meaning this library can actually move my mouse for me and can move my keyboard for me. So I can make it press delete 5 times and then replace it with my thing. And that's exactly how I built my snippet manager. So that was kind of the second step. And then the third step happened more or less on a little text document. Sometimes when you design requirements and plan and create like documentation, this will happen more when you are on a team where you are creating, like for example, for my current work, we will create a Google Doc kind of, you know, a page for a Google Doc, every single feature. So for example, if we want to have a feature on a app where users can log in, we will create a users and logging in Google Doc, and we will create an entire Google Doc that is filled with code, pseudocode, and design specifications purely for logging in. So there's a ton of writing that actually goes on as a software engineer, and that's pretty much the same or very similar at a lot of software engineering positions. You're going to have to do a ton of documentation when you're actually in a work environment. But again, this was my little personal program, so I went onto a little markdown document and I said, okay, so we need to control, so it came up with like a procedure like this, and then I said we need to, 1, control or read user input, then we need to process the user input, and then we need to delete original input, and then replace with snippet. And of course there are sub kind of categories, like we could say we need to check the user input, and then we need to check and then we need to compare against dictionary and stuff like that. So like I came up with a simple procedure, and again, after I made that procedure, I did more research, and that comes into the 4th, do research. I like basically did what I was doing earlier, and I went on Google and I was looking up, how do I do this? How do I do that? How do I do this? And all the while I was actually saving the link like this, and then I was, you know, coming onto my Google Doc here and I was just pasting it, and then I came here and I found this and I pasted it. And as I was going and designing my program, I would refer back to these websites that I used to kind of come up with how I would design my program. So that was pretty cool. And of course, after doing research, like I said, I just coded, or code slash, just code. And then of course it is test slash iterate slash get feedback. Like, again, I said I used a modified version of the software development lifecycle. Generally, after coding, you will either test your code, or you will iterate, aka like improve on it, or you'll get feedback, and sometimes you'll do multiple, sometimes you'll do all of these. Like, it just depends on, 1, who you are, and 2, what the procedure is where you work, or for yourself, or anything. Like, again, this SDLC is is pretty flexible because some guides only have 4 steps, some guides have 6 steps, some guides have 10 steps for the software development lifecycle. It just matters how like granular you want to get into the steps and how much you kind of want to do for each iteration. So this is kind of my personal list for solving problems. Now let's quickly go ahead and kind of wrap all of this up looking at another project that I made. So let me think. Oh yeah, my virtual desktop. This is a non-coding question actually, and it's basically I have used multiple computers in the past to do development. So the problem that I was running into is my development environment, aka my projects, all of my code, were not being synced up between multiple computers. So again, let's come up with here, and let's kind of fix the formatting across this. So that is mine, personal, or yeah, personal process, and then let's do an example. Of course, let's come here and say example. So again, we need to define our problem first because you need to know what you're solving. Problem. So my problem that I was having is I have to use multiple, or I not have to, but I use multiple computers. How, like my code environment is not synced between them, and I want them to be, or something like that. A simple, quick problem. And possible solutions, of course, because that's all part of coming up with this conceptual design, is basically coming up with your solution, figuring out what you want. And again, in engineering and in other disciplines of engineering, and even in certain software projects, this first step can be broken up into a million steps. In fact, some steps come before this, which is brainstorming and problem solution analysis and all that, but that's far beyond the scope of this video. So again, we're coming up with some possible solutions like this. We can use one computer, of course. We can sync their files, or we can, and through syncing their files, we can either upload/download, or we can do some sort of real-time sync. And of course, these all come with, etc. These all come with pros and cons, like upload, download. This seems pretty much simple. Real-time sync maybe would require a custom program, and then complicated, like versus like simpler may be hard to implement. I really didn't know. So I was just coming up with all of these solutions. And quick disclaimer, I did create a solution for this because this was a real problem I had, and I currently actually went with this solution here. So chosen solution, upload/download. So that's my conceptual design. Whenever I'm done using one computer, or even as I'm using one computer, it'll keep uploading files to the cloud. And when I want to switch computers, I'll just download those files, and boom, now I have a fully working kind of program. So then I thought, what are the problems with this? Problems? Of course there are. Too many files. Too big files. Maybe useless files. Like these are certain problems that I came up with, and all of these were solved with one kind of solution that I found online. So now is the time. So that's kind of my first conceptual design, and now my questions. How do I actually sync my files? So I came here into Google and said how to sync files between computers. So let's see here. Or even before we go there, actually for sure, how to sync files between computers. 5 useful solutions. So attach a hard drive to a network. Now I know this, a NAS. I just don't have the money to buy a hard drive and to buy a server or to set up a server. So this was just a no-go for me right off the bat. So I had to skip it. Sync files over a network, again, not really a viable option for me. Use cloud storage to sync files from one computer to another. I ended up using this solution right away. I use Google Backup and Sync. As you can see down here, it's actually syncing my workspace right now. And this was the solution I came up with. I could have kept going and I could have just looked at more solutions and done whatever. But in the end, I went with one of the possible solutions because in coding there are literally unlimited possible solutions. So you just got to choose one and run with it. So, as long as you've done some sort of analysis that this is a decent solution. So cloud storage. I know Google Drive gives me 15 free gigabytes of cloud storage. Believe me, when you're a programmer, if you only take what you need, you can get that under 15 gigabytes. You can get it under 10 gigabytes, even if you've been programming for 10 years. All of your projects, because code doesn't take up that much space. Dependencies of code does, but you don't need to actually take that from one computer to another. You can simply run a command to download the dependencies on command. So again, chosen solution, upload, download with cloud storage. So I guess I figured out my solution. Let's just take a look, backup and sync. So backup and sync by Google. Access and sync your content from any device. Okay, great. This seems to be exactly what I need. Backup all of your content. Easily access your files in Google Drive. So that's what I ended up using. Now let's come here. Design requirements, plan and create documentation. Again, I'm just going to come up with a really, really simple kind of design. Files are, or a special sync folder. Special sync folder is backed up on Google Drive. It syncs that folder between two computers. And then, again, do research, code, not necessary. Test, iterate, get feedback. I've been doing that for about a year now. It works fine. Like, again, I ended up just using backup and sync with Google. It keeps a single folder kind of synchronized between my two computers, and that is about my solution. Now, there are some fancy stuff I did. There is some fancy stuff I did to reduce the files, like to reduce the number of files that I was actually keeping synced, but that is all beyond the scope of this video, especially since I think I'm a bit over time here. So yeah, this has pretty much just been my kind of process when solving problems in general, both in software, work, personal, in life even. This is just a good framework for solving many different kinds of problems, and it's just really applying in a distilled version of the engineering method to problems. And the engineering method has worked for forever, and it still works today. So yeah, if you want to see more videos like this, I have a playlist linked in the description that is all about my tech kind of non-tutorial type content. If you enjoyed the video, please consider giving a thumbs up, subscribe and hit the bell icon for notifications whenever I post new videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.